It's December. Does that mean it's Derrick Henry time? We'll debate that and more on the Week 13 edition of the Footballguys Daily Fantasy Power Grid presented by DraftKings. John Lee, we need to know what Vegas is telling us about Week 13. What is the guidance you can give us based on the Vegas lines?
The thing that jumped out to me this week is that there are 5 teams that are favored by a touchdown or more. Minnesota, we know who the guy there is, Dalvin Cook.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely going to be one of the favorite running backs this week. Just beneath them, Las Vegas. There are some questions about running back there this week, so we're not really sure what to do as of yet, but we'll certainly talk about that. Green Bay, 8.5-point favorites over Philadelphia. So Aaron Jones definitely in play. Miami, another questionable backfield this week, but they're 11.5-point favorites. So there should be some value there. And then the last one, of course, I can't find it. Seattle up against the Giants at home, 10-point favorites. Interesting there because last week we saw Chris Carson. But it was Carlos Hyde who actually got the majority carries. So there are definitely some different ways to go this week. We typically like to go with those heavy home favorites, knowing that they're going to see a lot of opportunity in the second half of the game. And the question is, which ones are the right ones to pick, and then which ones are fool's gold. Outside of those guys, high team totals this week. Minnesota tops the list. Again, that's that Dalvin Cook play we've already kind of mentioned. And then Tennessee, talking about Derrick Henry, they're 5.5-point home favorites against Devin's Cleveland Browns with a 29.5-point implied team total. So he's definitely in play as well. So they're
going to win by 20. The Browns are terrible. They're the worst 8-3 team I've ever seen. Anyway.
Well, whatever the case, I guess bet Tennessee then because they're 5.5-point favorites as of Thursday night. And, all the top teams, -10, -5, -10, -8, -8, all the big ones are heavy home favorites. So you're looking at a lot of running backs this week. And, when I went through my first read, I was kind of surprised. And I guess maybe we'll talk about that when the show proceeds.
Yeah, we got to guide people to the right set of running backs here this week because there's a lot of options that potentially are a good situation. Devin, we're going to talk about quarterbacks, and I'm going to pitch it to you first. We've got Daniel Jones is out, and potentially this week we could have Tua Tagovailoa coming back this week. So tell me, which quarterbacks do you like?
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting week because we're recording on Thursday, and with all the COVID news and all the late news that we've gotten this year, all of this is subject to change. Check our articles on footballguys.com. Come back on Saturday nights. I have the Q&A that I've been doing the last couple of weeks. We'll have better information, but John's article is one of the best in the industry. I have my cash game article. Phil has a GPP article. So we're all updating throughout the night, really over the next 72 hours. So with that disclaimer put aside, I think the quarterback that I'm looking at this week, I'm going to go with Phillip Rivers against Houston. And it's a little bit scary to go with Rivers, but this Houston defense has been absolutely horrendous. And looking into them just a little bit, if we look at their last several games, I mean, they're on the season, they're allowing 270 yards passing, but over the last 2 games, they've allowed 300 yards to Matthew Stafford and 365 to Cam Newton. They've allowed over 300 yards 4 times this year, and it's a team in which I'm sure Phil is going to talk about Jonathan Taylor, but they are built to pass the ball. They're not running the ball. Nyheim Hines burned everyone last week. So I'm going Rivers probably in cash as we stand today. But that's always subject to change, like I mentioned. Going down even further, I kind of want to get the guy's opinion, but is there any love for Colt McCoy if you want to punt the position? So
No.
at 48,
That's a double no.
at 4,800 against Seattle, it's a favorable matchup, and is he really that much worse than Daniel Jones? I don't think so. I think he can come in and at least manage the offense, throw for 250 yards, maybe 2 touchdowns against this Seattle defense that has struggled for most of the year. And then on the other side of the ball, if I'm going way up, it's Russell Wilson against this Giants defense. But I'm sure someone else will talk about him.
Phil, what do you think? I got double no from Phil and John on the Colt McCoy call. Even for GPPs, it sounds like. What do you think,
Yeah,
Phil?
I just have no desire to look at a lineup with Colt McCoy in it this week. I know it's a good matchup, but his arm is straight pop gun. It's just I don't think he has what it takes to exploit that Seattle defense. So Devin made a good point mentioning that it's still a little early in the week on Thursday to know exactly how the slate is going to shake out, and I just want to touch on a play that we don't quite know if he's going to get the start yet, but I'm kind of waiting for the go-ahead to plug Ryan Fitzpatrick into cash games. Where we stand today, if we have to read between the lines a little bit, we got a quote from Brian Flores that said they're not going to decide until Sunday who's starting the game, whether it's Fitzpatrick or Tua. And he said something interesting. He said, Tua is our starter when he's 100% healthy. So it sounded to me like he's leaving himself an out to say that, maybe if Tua is 98% healthy, I could still turn the keys over to Ryan Fitzpatrick, who's a much better quarterback. I don't think that anybody's debating that. He's 3-0 in his last 3 starts. This team is 7-4. They're very much in the playoff picture, and they're kind of in win now mode. And Fitzpatrick, from a cash game standpoint, literally his floor on DraftKings this season is 3x his current salary. He's done 18 or better in every game since week 1. And he's got Cincinnati this week. And before Cincinnati faced Alex Smith and the fabulous combination of Daniel Jones and Colt McCoy in their last 2 games, they had given up 14 passing touchdowns over their last 4. So I'm really, really hoping that we get to plug in Ryan Fitzpatrick. I would kind of make that automatic. Otherwise, I guess I'm looking at Ryan Tannehill. I mean, he managed 19 points with Derrick Henry still going nuts last week.
He ran for a touchdown.
But he does that. I mean, that's part of of the appeal.
It's that Aggie receiver in him.
Yeah, man, he's a former wide receiver. He could get there.
Derrick Henry gets the red zone runs. Let's calm down there a little bit.
Like I said, I'm not thrilled. I mean, I really don't like any quarterbacks for cash unless Fitzpatrick is in play. Just dropping down real quick, I'll give you 2 for GPPs.
Sure.
And maybe you guys could let me know if you think this is cash viable, because it's certainly more cash viable than Colt McCoy. And that's Mitchell Trubisky at 5,400 on DraftKings. I like him for tournaments. I'm not suggesting he's a GPP play, but I am saying that if we're dropping way down, I'm more inclined to play someone like Trubisky. But for GPPs, he's shown us that he has a ceiling. We don't have to go back more than a couple of years to when he was winning the Millie Maker for people more than once. So he does have a ceiling. He does have a 24-point game as recently as this season against Detroit, and he loves playing Detroit. He's got exactly 3 touchdown passes in each of his last 4 games against Detroit, dating back to 2018. I think that some of his weapons are going to be pretty popular. Allen Robinson and maybe even Darnell Mooney, who's only 3,400. So he's pretty easily stackable. So I don't know. What do you fellas think on Trubisky?
I want to pass it to John here on this, but what I'm hearing is not a whole lot of I'm paying up at quarterback, and I get the sense that's because you want to pay up at other positions. This happens a lot, especially early in the week before we see some guys drop out on Friday and Saturday. So John, do you have like a high priced guy if value opens up later in the week, and do you have like a low price guy that you're like, well, if it sticks the way it is, that's who I got to roll with?
I must have done this show before, because you know exactly what I have. Look, maybe I'll comment on the Trubisky pick.
Yeah.
He's the guy that's, I mean, for what it's worth, I'm looking at my spreadsheet right now. On a sheer value component, Mitch Trubisky is my top value play. I have him delivering 3.47x value based on his projections. That said, I don't know if I could pull the trigger on him in cash games. It's really tough to do. And as you're listening to this out there, you're hearing three or four guys here talking about we're not really sure, and that's because we're not. It's a tough position this week for cash games. The guys I'm looking at, I think the surest thing is Aaron Rodgers at 6,800. I like him more than anybody that we've heard. The question is whether or not I can get up to him with the other positions. If you look at what Rodgers has been doing, I mean, the last, go back to 5 weeks, 4 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns, 2 with 300, another 303. And last week, he only threw for 211 yards, but he had 4 touchdowns along the way. The guy continues to rack up yardage. The thing is, I typically like to pay down at quarterback if I can. And this week, I have a feeling here come the red black-eyed Joes, but the one that I kind of like
Mike Glennon.
is Mike Glennon at 4,800.
I love it.
Phil hates it.
Yeah, he did what I thought he was going to do last week. He said, look, I'm at a stage in my career. I'm just going to go out and sling it and do my thing. We know that Minnesota's going to get out there and score points. It's basically the same call as what Devin called with Seattle and the Giants and Colt McCoy. I think that Mike Glennon is in a better spot in the sense that he's got better receivers and just a better all-around squad. And so from that end, I like Mike Glennon a bit more if you're going to punt the position. But it doesn't make me, I'm not going to sleep well on Saturday night if that's where I land on my cash game quarterback. But if I can get there, it's going to be Aaron Rodgers.
Devin, what do you want to add here? I've seen you kind of flash.
I love Mike Glennon. He looked good last week. I mean, he's been a journeyman, but some of these journeymen just come in and they know their role and they don't care. I mean, Ryan Fitzpatrick fits that mold. So it's like guys sometimes just come out of the woodwork. The matchup could not be any better. I still think I prefer Colt McCoy slightly, but I like both of these guys, and we're going to talk about other positions, and I do not want to spend up at quarterback as we stand today at 9:09 Eastern on Thursday night. Until COVID value comes up, I'm not spending up at the position.
Yeah, and
I have to say something.
Yeah, go for it, Phil.
I have to say something. I'm sorry. I'm chomping at the bit. Mike Glennon, how long has Mike Glennon been in the NFL?
A lot of years.
7 years.
Right. And his claim to fame before torching Cleveland last week was that his neck looks like a mozzarella stick. So how...
Be nice.
How on earth are we... So Mike Glennon, if we're even talking about him, he is the reason why we're considering Ryan Tannehill, because the Browns give up these games to quarterbacks.
No,
the matchup could be
Ryan
better
Tannehill's
for Mike Glennon. He could be playing the Browns. I'm just saying, Mike Glennon is horrible. He is going to be horrible this week. He wasn't horrible last week because he was playing the Browns, and maybe he took them by surprise because they weren't expecting him.
No.
I'm telling you that if we're considering going down to Mike Glennon, just play Mitchell Trubisky.
No, Trubisky's floor is like 3 points.
Mike Glennon's floor is he doesn't finish the game, which is the same as Mitchell Trubisky's floor.
There is a small chance that Foles is available as a backup in this game. Is that correct? Does that maybe? I mean, we talked about Mitch Trubisky too much, but pay attention to the Foles thing too. Like
Trubisky's a fine GPP play, but there's no way I can do it in cash.
I agree.
So for what it's worth, I think he's an excellent GPP play. I'm just not sure I'm buying him for cash.
Yeah,
I think the 18 points, the 18 points was Glennon's career high in like a decade. Why are we talking?
Let's move on.
Okay, let's move on. We're going to talk about some running backs here, but let's recap. It sounds like John right now is looking at Aaron Rodgers. I think some value is going to end up opening up that he's going to end up with Aaron Rodgers as his primary cash game quarterback here. Phil, it sounds like he's going to go with some Fitzmagic as long as Tua sits. And then Devin is probably not going to pay up for Russell Wilson. He's going to talk him into one of these.
I'm either going Glennon or McCoy.
Yeah, I could see that. All right. Devin has a way of finding a cheap quarterback and then, winning it out on some other positions. So hopefully that works out for you.
Devin, send Phil a cash game because he wants it. He's up there. I mean, I'm looking at him. He's like, send me your cash games.
Anyone who wants to play cash.
Yeah, I think the YouTube commenters are going to want your cash games as well. Please comment down below if you would love to play Devin playing either Colt McCoy or Mike Glennon as his cash game quarterback. Running backs. We're keeping an eye on a few guys here. DeAndre Swift did not practice on Thursday. He's out of the concussion protocol, but he was held out of practice due to illness that is not COVID related. So that's a bit of a mystery. Keep an eye on that one. It looks like Jonathan Taylor will be back this week after missing one game on the COVID list. Josh Jacobs did not practice on Thursday, so he is looking iffy for this week against the Jets. And the Dolphins' backfield is a complete mess. We'll know more about that later in the week, but, you guys can make some calls on that if you feel strongly about it. Let's go to Phil first on running backs. Phil, who do we start with at the top of our list for cash games?
Sure. So I guess I'll start out by saying Devontae Booker is the chalk that's lurking. If Josh Jacobs doesn't make it back, he's one of the first guys that I'm going to be looking to plug in against the Jets. The Raiders should have no problem with the Jets, who are playing for Trevor Lawrence. And Booker is one of a few potential values that could open up on the slate. But as it stands tonight on Thursday, I think I got my eye on two guys for cash. One is the obvious Dalvin Cook. He's just kind of like the evergreen cash game play,
right?
Because of the workloads that he's been getting. He did have a little bit of a scary ankle thing last week, but he says he's ready to roll. He kind of bristled when somebody said, "Hey, you're breaking down under the heavy workloads." So it sounds like he's got a chip on his shoulder, and he's got the Jaguars. They don't discriminate when it comes to allowing fantasy points. And, if we assume that Cook is going to handle his usual 25, 30 touches, it's hard to picture him not getting, even multiple touchdowns with that team implied to score about 30. And then the other one, I think Austin Eckler on DraftKings anyway is priced pretty well at 7,100. He came back to the same exact role that he was enjoying over the first three games that made him the seventh overall running back in cumulative scoring over the first 3 weeks. He was on the field for 72% of the snaps, handled 74% of the team's backfield touches. He did record 11 receptions on 16 targets, which I don't see as repeatable this week, but I think he'll be good for his usual 5 to 6. So I think that's enough at 7,100 for cash games. And I think that New England's run defense is also beatable. I would be fading him in GPPs because I think that he's going to get up there in terms of roster percentage. And I think people might look at those 11 receptions last week and try to put those in the bank. And again, I don't think that that's too sustainable. This is just a different spot for the Chargers. Last week, they were on the road, traveling cross country to play at 1 p.m. And, that kind of went the way that it sometimes does. I guess I'll save my GPP picks for when we come back around. I'll give the other guys a chance to chip in.
Sounds good. John, who's at the top? Dalvin Cook here at the top of the cash game list, right?
Yeah, definitely Dalvin Cook. And look, I mean, I guess I should officially say it. I think what DraftKings is doing, and I'm glad they're doing it, but they're pricing everybody in preparation for what could go wrong with COVID. The fact that Devontae Booker is 5,500 tells you that they're preparing for the worst. It's like at any given time, somebody can get COVID, and they don't want 40% of people owning a 4K running back. So they're pricing backups as if they could be playing. And the result of that is that it's a really tough slate, and it's not limited to quarterback, and it's not limited to running back. It's a really tight slate this week in terms of what to like, and it's going to make for some really interesting cash games, and certainly for GPPs as well. There's going to be some bad chalk because a lot of people are going to be trying to save salary at the same place. For cash games, Dalvin Cook certainly in play. I like the Eckler call for the same reasons that Phil's already outlined. I was actually surprised that he didn't call out the one player that kind of jumped off the screen at me. The only player that really jumped off for me was David Montgomery at 5,500. He's priced at a level. I mean, you can put up the red black guy Joe. We're not both going to be wrong here. If you look at the value, 2.9 is what I got him for value, and the next closest guy is Dalvin Cook at 2.6. He's on a team that's playing Detroit. Detroit is allowing 33 points per game to opposing running backs, by far the worst in the league. I think the next closest one is like 30 points. And we know that a team that's going to like to run the ball. I get it. You're not going to want Trubisky and David Montgomery heading up your cash game lineups. But if you're not playing one, you can't play the other. So that's the way I would go. Dalvin Cook, Demont, Austin Eckler. And then in GPPs, I've got one name here that I think I'm going to save for Devin, because I know he wants to talk about that person. And then the other one that's on my list is Aaron Jones going up against Philadelphia, 7,200. I like him a lot for GPPs this week. I think that's a great spot for him at home against a team that's largely given up. And the line also favors him at 8.5 points.
Devin, what do you think? Running backs?
Yeah, so I talked about why I'm going quarterback, and the reason is I'm playing both Derrick Henry and Dalvin Cook in cash this week. And we can talk about wide receivers that I like later, but there's a wide receiver at 3,300 that I'm loving this week. So for me, Derrick Henry is the lock to top 100 yards this week. The Browns' run defense statistically has been okay. The problem is if you actually dive deeper into the numbers, they're pretty horrendous. So James Robinson torched them for 128 yards and a touchdown last week. Josh Jacobs had 128 yards 2 weeks ago. James Conner topped 100 yards in like the only game James Conner's topped 100 yards in forever. They've played probably the weakest schedule in the NFL. I mean, facing guys like Duke Johnson, Giovanni Bernard, Jonathan Taylor, Antonio Gibson before he was Antonio Gibson in his second career game. And then, they played the Ravens in week 1, which they were still figuring out their backfield. So they're not a good run defense. Their linebacking group is horrendous, and it was exposed last week. And Derrick Henry, we talked about in the opening, it's Derrick Henry season. He's getting 30. He's going to get 25 to 30 touches. He's probably going to score at least once, probably twice, and he's going to top 100 yards. How can you not like that in cash? I don't know. Dalvin Cook's always a good play, and then the last guy going down a little bit. I do like the David Montgomery call, even though I have a pinned tweet right now that says if I ever play David Montgomery again, someone please slap me, so I might have to get slapped next week. And then... yeah, so that's great. I think that's it. I mean, Austin Eckler's fine. I can't get behind Booker just because he's the same price. He's too expensive. That's the problem. He's the same price as Montgomery, and he's $100 more expensive than Kareem Hunt. Talk about guys who've never done it. I mean, Devontae Booker has had so many chances in the NFL and just sucks.
He's done it twice already this season as a backup. I think he's fine. I think he's flexible. I think he's the perfect DraftKings play. And I would much, much, much rather play him than Montgomery if he ends up with the starting job. Just a quick question. Derrick Henry and Dalvin Cook in cash, you're doing that on both sites, or is that just a FanDuel thing?
That's a DraftKings thing.
Okay. I'll buy it. I mean, Derrick Henry's in a great spot. I definitely don't mind a running back.
I just want the certainty of, I mean, we saw Dalvin Cook last week, and there's never certainty in anything that we're doing. But if there's two running backs on this slate that are certain, I guess Austin Eckler might come close, but I worry about Belichick just taking that away and forcing someone else to beat them. Aaron Jones, I mean, his floor is just too low at 7,200 for me. That's the only other guy, and the matchup isn't good against Philly either. So I don't know. I think it's a tough week. Outside of those guys, Nick Chubb might be a little bit interesting in GPPs. He seems to continue to go under rostered because of the Kareem Hunt split, but all the guy does is run for nearly 100 yards every week. And he found the end zone last week on 144 yards. So I'm going that way as of now, but, I think that I just can't get comfortable with some of these mid-range guys.
Phil, who else you got on your running back list?
Yeah, so we'll pivot over to GPP running backs. I was pretty excited to run back my Trubisky, Allen Robinson stacks with DeAndre Swift. What a crazy day it was for him in the news cycle. It started out that he was expected back. Then Adrian Peterson gave this interview. He made it sound like Swift was like in a coma, that like he couldn't even stand.
It sounded like he was a zombie.
Yeah, then all of a sudden, 5 minutes after that report, he cleared the protocol, and he was just sick. If I had to guess, it sounded like he's got some post-concussion symptoms, which makes me a little bit leery of him playing. But if he's okay, I don't think there's going to be a lot of concentration on the Detroit side of that game, even though Chicago's going to get some love. And I think you want to run it back with Swift, who's an explosive player. And then as an added bonus, there's the narrative of Matt Patricia finally being gone and the Lions kind of celebrating his removal. Darrell Bevell's already talking about playing more up-tempo. The faster the pace that they play at, that favors the Lions, including Swift. But let's just operate under the assumption that he'll be out. Three more guys I actually really like. One is Kenyon Drake. Over the last 2 weeks, he's out-touched Chase Edmonds 40-16. He's seen the same number of targets as Edmonds in the passing game, which is 9, and that was always Edmonds' role. And at the goal line, he's handled 7 out of 8 possible carries over the last 2 weeks and scored 3 times. I think that Kyler Murray didn't run so much last week because he hurt his shoulder and he's trying to avoid contact. That might be funneling more touches to Drake, who appears to be healthy, maybe for the first time all year. And I think that it's easier to run on the Rams than pass on them. So I'm going to be over the field on Drake in my GPP lineups for sure. And then it would not be a 2020 episode of the Power Grid if I did not give some love to Jonathan Taylor.
We're not debating this.
Listen,
we knew it was coming. This will also cause the YouTube comments to blow up. People are going to be like, "No, Phil, no."
We're not debating this.
Let me just give the case quickly.
A quick one, very quick.
Very quick. Before he became close contact on the COVID list, he looked good. Ran for 90 yards on 22 carries, caught another 4 for 24. Any running back with Phillip Rivers has pass catching upside. And this is down to a 2-man backfield. In the 2 games before Taylor went out with COVID, Jordan Wilkins was down to a 15% snap share, and now he has a rib injury. And they're playing Houston. They're playing Houston. You guys.
That's the biggest thing. They're playing Houston. Yeah. John, do you want to mention one last GPP guy?
I don't know. I don't want to mention. I'm going to throw it back to Phil. I'm fearful though, for his answer. I do like it's one of my stacks is Trubisky out there with A-Rob and running it back with a running back. No pun intended. If DeAndre Swift doesn't play, which one are we picking? Because I think you can make a case for either.
It's carry on.
Because they're going to be playing from behind, right?
Yeah. The only way that stack works is with carry on, I think.
I don't know if it's the only way it works. I mean, I ran deep with an Adrian Peterson lineup on Thanksgiving that was stacked with Deshaun Watson and company. If he is the one who manages to fall into the end zone a couple of times, it could work. I think it's certainly more logical with the pass catching back, though. And yeah. I think that carry on has more juice in his legs at this stage of the game.
Well, that's what I was looking for. So I have carry on's 44, Adrian Peterson's 49. This may be a moot point. If DeAndre Swift plays, then this is a dead segment. So I'm not going to spend any more time on it outside of saying Adrian Peterson gets the red zone carries, which is why I was asking. But I think Kerryon Johnson at a 10% discount is the guy.
Damian Harris is a GPP play is interesting. So 16, 14, 22, 11, and 14 touches in his last 5 games, facing a Chargers defense that has largely fell off from a run stopping perspective. So I think that there's a perspective that Harris is in a decent spot.
Nice. Please hit that subscribe button, hit the bell, and you'll get those notifications from us when we post new videos. And please give us a thumbs up. Let's talk about wide receivers. John, we're going to come to you first. We've got Adam Thielen coming back after missing 1 game on the COVID list. We've got Will Fuller suspended, so maybe there's some other value there in Houston. And that's all I got on my list. John, tell us about the receivers you like.
Kenny Stills was cut
it's
too,
weird.
right?
Kenny Stills was cut. So you've got basically Kiki Cutie and Brandin Cooks, both of who come up pretty high on my list this week with regards to cash games. Cooks is the one that I'll be playing. I want the better receiver there, and he was actually taking over a pretty good wide receiver 1 role before the Fuller suspension. So he's the guy that I think I'll be locking in at wide receiver and then building out around him.
In both?
Say again?
Cash and GPP?
I think in GPPs at this moment, it's difficult to say because I can see his percent rostered is getting upwards of 30%. And that typically is a fade for me. But that's one of the ones that I always tell people, check my article out because percent rostered changes so much from Thursday night to Saturday that it's really difficult for me to say, unequivocally that it's going to be a fade. But 30% is pretty tough. But Cooks is high on my cash game list. If you can get there, Devontae Adams is certainly there, but I can't. I actually built a cash game lineup during the running back segment, and there's no way I could get to him. But I did get Aaron Rodgers to the question that Austin brought forth earlier. So cash, Devontae Adams. Robert Woods is in a great spot this week. I love the way they're using him. They're getting him the ball all different ways. And that game, I like it to shoot out against Arizona. So like him at 5,900. Already talked about Cooks. And then several of the Jets wide receivers come up high for me. You can take your pick, but I think my pick this week is Denzel Mims at 4,100. I like what he's doing in that offense, and he looks to be coming into his own. And they get an upgrade, of course, with quarterback with Sam Darnold. So that's really my very limited list. I mean, I think you could make some arguments for maybe Darnell Mooney. Looked like he was in a good, he's moving up. But if we're going to be very clear, those are the 4 guys I've got right now.
Devin, what do you think about wide receivers?
Not much.
Perfect.
Pass. I'm just gonna punt the position. No, I do like Cutie quite a bit. I think that there's a scenario in which how good is Brandin Cooks, because he's going to see double teams all day, and I think at 30% in a GPP, that's a mistake to roster him there. I don't know how good of a receiver he actually is, and I think losing Will Fuller actually hurts him because the safeties have more potential to be shadowing him, and the defense really just game plans around him. So I could see a scenario where Cutie gets 8, 9, 10 targets, particularly against this decent pass rush for the Colts. And at 3,500 as a PPR machine, I sort of like it. Along the same lines, I do like the Denzel Mims call quite a bit. He's probably my favorite guy in that offense. And then I don't know what I'm doing with the Giants, but I think that there's a guy there that's probably interesting. I think it's Sterling Shepard in the GPP. I don't know. I think of Darius Slayton as more of the deep threat, even though that Sterling Shepard has the deep play potential. But I think he's more versatile as a receiver. So I like Shepard quite a bit as a GPP play. And then I don't know about the Rams. And that's like, can Robert Woods beat Patrick Peterson? That's the question. I don't know.
They'll scheme in such a way to get him the ball in space. They do it every week. They run him on these end arounds. They throw quick outs and slants, and I mean the guy's all over the field. They'll get him away from Patrick Peterson.
I guess where I was going is I sort of like Cooper Kupp out of the slot, because if Peterson is shadowing Woods, which I expect him to, I sort of like Cooper Kupp as an under the radar guy.
I don't think he's going to be under the radar though. I suspect he's going to be on 15 to 20% of rosters, assuming you're talking about GPPs.
Yeah, I have him at 12% right now, but if he gets up to 20, I think it's too high. But I think that Woods will be higher than that.
I agree with you. I think Woods is going to be a notch higher.
Yeah. Phil, what do you think? Wide receiver.
Sure. So agree with John's call on Adams in cash games if you could get up to him. I don't hate the idea of fading one of the expensive running backs that we talked about and playing Adams instead, because I think you're banking 100+ yards and a touchdown against the Eagles. The way that you beat them is with the pass, and Adams is probably the best, if not one of the best three in the game. Brandin Cooks, I agree that for cash games, the volume should be enough to get him there at 5,600, but he's absolutely a fade in GPPs at 5,600 for all of the reasons that Devin mentioned. And I just want to point that out to people watching and listening. When you got a guy like Brandin Cooks at 30% rostered, and you compare that to someone in the same price range like Jarvis Landry, who had a big game last week and has a great matchup this week, he's probably going to be 3 to 5% rostered. What you're really saying to yourself there, if you're picking Cooks out of those two in a tournament, is that you think Cooks is 10 times more likely to get where you need him to go than Jarvis Landry. And I don't know that, when you think about it that way, that you could say that even has a chance. It's just not true. So definitely getting way too high for GPPs. My tournament play, by the way, and I love Denzel Mims. I think you could play him in tournaments also, because I don't think he'll be super popular, but he's getting targets. He has big play athleticism. And one of my favorite things to do is look at those unrealized air yards. And over the last 5 weeks, he trails only Jerry Jeudy and Chase Claypool in that category. So agree, Mims is a good play. Two guys that haven't been mentioned, Devontae Parker. This is subject to Ryan Fitzpatrick being the starter. But if Fitzpatrick is starting, we saw the first game last week with Fitzpatrick in the lineup and Preston Williams out of it. And it was 14 targets for Devontae Parker, and the next closest Dolphin had 5. That will absolutely continue. Fitzpatrick loves to throw it up and let Parker go get it. And then a pure tournament play that I think is probably going to be sub 5% is Tyler Lockett. I think in the slot is the way that you want to beat the Giants in the secondary. And that's interesting. I'm looking forward to hearing John's take.
John disagreed.
Yeah, granted, Lockett is too expensive. All of the Seahawks are too expensive. DraftKings priced them up for this matchup, and I don't know that it was justified, because if you look at what they've done the last 3 weeks, the defense has gotten a little bit better. The opponents have gotten a little bit worse. They can't keep up with the Seahawks. And as a result, they're kind of going back into their Pete Carroll, Brian Schottenheimer shell, where Russ is like simmering. He's not quite cooking. So I get it. And I'll see if that's what John's getting at. But I just think that anytime that you have a guy like Lockett, if he's going to be sub 5%, we've seen him break the slate completely on 2 separate occasions. And, going up against the Giants personnel in the secondary, I'm willing to take a chance on 10% of my tournament lineups.
John, why do you not like Lockett as a GPP play?
Yeah, something he said at the very end there. I want to make sure I heard it. What did you say, sub 5% about what?
I was just saying that anytime someone like Lockett is going to be sub 5%, which is where I currently have him projected, I'd be.
No,
you think he's going to go higher?
Wrong.
I think he's 14%.
I've got him somewhere in here.
People are
14 to 18% is where I had him projected.
The Seahawks are projected to score a lot of points. Even though they're going to be expensive, or they're expensive, I predict a lot of people will still be on them.
See, my thought is that everybody's just going to find the extra 800 and go to Metcalf, with that highlight bias that happens sometimes. And he's been crushing. Lockett really hasn't reached the ceiling in, I don't know, 5 weeks. I just think in that 7,400 range, there's other names people are going to click. I would guess sub 10% for sure, but I was thinking of putting him in about 10 to 12% of my GPP lineups, thinking that he was under the radar, but I'm ready to be wrong there by Sunday.
Yeah, so I mean, I think some of it was what you were describing with regards to all of the Seahawks are overpriced this week. I haven't mentioned this yet, but I'll give you my fade list as of Thursday night. My fade list is Russell Wilson, Duke Johnson, who I was surprised he's going to be on like 15% of rosters.
We're still talking about this guy.
No, I don't want to talk about him. Just fade him. That's the point. Fade Tyler Lockett at 15, 16%, and then Hunter Henry and the Bears defense. All of those players I'll be underweight on going into the weekend. But Lockett, you called out some of the things already, Phil. But if he's going to be on 15 to 20%, and that's where I'm currently seeing him across the industry, and it sounded like Devin, who hasn't taken his live yet, is about the same. That's going to be too high for me. I've got him currently at 5.8%, 5.8% likely to reach 4x value. And so if he's going to go off at 3 times that, then I'm going to be underweight.
That would change my take.
Can we talk about a team for a second?
Which one?
Indianapolis Colts. So they're facing Houston. Michael Pittman is 4,900. T.Y. Hilton is 4,300. Who are they going to throw the ball to?
Michael Pittman.
Yeah.
I like
Trey
both
Burton.
of these guys. I mean, Hilton actually had his first good game of the year last week. I mean, it was a 50-yard touchdown, and it largely took away from what Pittman did. But I sort of like both of these guys this week. I know that Nyheim Hines is still getting the targets, but Pittman had 9 targets last week. So I'm not afraid to go to him in cash at 4,900. I really believe in this Colts offense. Hilton is more of a GPP play, but I do think that he has upside. I just think that we talk about the Seahawks being overpriced. I think the Colts are underpriced this week.
That's the first thing in 13 weeks that we've all agreed on.
Nice.
Should stop the show now.
And then anything in while we're at it, anything in New England, like, do we ever trust? They're all cheap. Like, it's spin the wheel and hope it lands on the right one.
Nah.
It's tough. I have N'Keal Harry as being a nice value play, but that team is just dysfunctional. It's tough to get behind them.
And like Edelman was like getting closer to coming back, and then I think I saw he got put on the COVID list this week or something. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, Jacoby Myers is interesting. I mean, he's been last couple weeks the consistent number 1 guy there, but it's a tough matchup. I don't know.
Let's recap our cash game picks. Oh, yeah. We forgot to do that at the running back section. Let's recap on the wide receivers here. Phil, quickly give us your cash game receivers.
Cash games, I like Devontae Adams and Brandin Cooks, and I'll second Devin on Michael Pittman.
Adams in cash?
I would absolutely play Adams in cash, sure.
I mean, he's saying that he might play, like he may fade Derrick Henry in cash and maybe do like Cooks, Adams. I mean, maybe you could even get an Adams Rodgers stack. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, I don't think you can go Adams, Rodgers, and Cook.
And Cook, that's too much.
I don't think that'll work. I mean, the only way you can get Cook and Adams in there is if you go with a guy like Mike Glennon. Maybe you could get there with Mitchell Trubisky, but
yeah. Okay, Devin, cash game plays.
For me, it's Denzel Mims, it's Kiki Cutie, and it is Sterling Shepard.
Going cheap there so you can get the 2 big running backs.
Yep.
John, recap your cash.
Adams with Phil on that one. I think we all agreed on Denzel Mims. Cooks was one, Brandin Cooks, and then the one that I think I was the lone wolf on was Robert Woods.
Got it. Excellent. All right. Let's check out some tight ends. I don't know that it matters, but we got Zach Ertz maybe coming back after missing 5 games this week. Devin, let's kick it to you. Talk about tight ends. Who do you like?
Yeah, so if I look at the tight end position, it's sort of a good week because we don't have the must-play guy like we did last week in Travis Kelce. I mean, it's getting to the point where it's like you just play Kelce and you figure the rest of it out. So this week, I'm looking really at 2, maybe 3 guys. And the first guy that I'm looking at, you mentioned him a little bit earlier, is Trey Burton at 3,500. I'm really starting to see more and more of this offense from a share perspective. He had 3 for 42. He scored a touchdown in his last 2 games. At 3,500, I like him quite a bit. Not sure I can go there in cash, but the guy that I think I'm going in cash with at the moment is Hunter Henry going up against New England. I think that they're going to really sell out to stop Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler, and I think it could be a big Hunter Henry week. And then the third guy that I'll go down the list for just a little bit is Robert Tonyan for Green Bay as a GPP play. So it's a pretty good fade off of Devontae Adams, particularly if he gets more and more popular. If Tonyan scores a touchdown, you're in a pretty good spot. And he scored 7 this year. So I think that he's potentially cash game viable at 3,700. I mean, he's had 44 yards and a touchdown and 67 yards and a touchdown in the last 2 weeks. So if you wanted to go Tonyan over Burton, I wouldn't hate that call either.
John, you didn't care for the Hunter Henry call. You mentioned earlier that's one of your big fades this week. What are you seeing there?
Yeah, I mean, I've just got 10 guys who are better value on points per dollar than Hunter Henry. I think his price has creeped up. It's still in the 4Ks, but it's really dangerously close to 5K. And the bigger reason why I don't think he's viable this week in cash is because there's one guy I thought for sure Devin was going to call this person out because it's the one thing that looks like a sure thing at the position, and that's Jordan Akins at 2,900. I get that he's not like a name brand tight end, but on a week where we're trying to find some value, this is where it's at. This in defense, you can get Jordan Akins for 2,900, and they just lost their best receiver, and he's a guy that can handle the ball. And he had a bad couple games ago. I saw him drop. I had him, so I know he dropped a couple key passes in that game. I was upset with him. Was that on Thanksgiving against Detroit? But he's 2,900, super cheap, projected to score about 9 points, which is all that you need him to do. And you can get up to some of the guys we've already talked about on this show. So for me, that's lock and load. I don't mind the Tonyan call, but I think it's Jordan Akins all the way for me in cash.
See, I'm going down with Kiki Cutie, which is why I don't need to go with Akins. Akins' floor is 0, as we saw on Thanksgiving. 2 of his last 3 games, he's topped 1.5 points, or he's had 1.5 or less points. So,
those were games with Will Fuller on the field, who was probably getting 10 targets a game.
Does Will Fuller really matter for Jordan Akins? I mean, that's the counter argument there.
I think he does, right? I mean, you just got done telling us why we shouldn't play Brandin Cooks because he's going to get double teamed and there's going to be nobody else to throw to. Well, there's your guy who's going to be thrown to.
Yeah, but are they going to game plan around Jordan Akins? I don't know. Darren Fells sees more snaps than him. Pharaoh Brown sees more snaps than him. He's in a three-headed race where I just don't know that he's the clear-cut guy.
All right. Agree to disagree. Phil, break the tie or pick someone else.
Yeah, I think if I was looking for someone in the Akins range, I would rather find 500 more and get up to Kyle Rudolph, provided Irv Smith is out again and he hasn't practiced this week as of Thursday. I like the call on Kyle Rudolph for both cash games and for tournaments. I think he's a good leverage play on Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, and Kirk Cousins. I expect all of those guys to be fairly heavily owned in tournaments this week. And, Rudolph last week, he might not see another 8 targets because Thielen is back on the field. But without Irv Smith, his route participation is going to stay high. It was top 5 among tight ends last week, and we know the guy could catch touchdowns. He's been doing it his whole career. Another guy in that price range, almost a even swap for Akins, is Jacob Hollister for Seattle. So last week was the first week Seattle played without Greg Olsen, who hurt his foot. And yes, this is my 3K crapper of the week. It's a tight end this week.
You guys haven't said the best guy at that number, but okay, go ahead.
Hold on. Hollister, he's in a timeshare with Will Dissly. Dissly outsnapped him, but Dissly did not run a single route last week, if Pro Football Focus can be believed. So Hollister did run 21 routes. That was more than any Seattle player besides Metcalf and Lockett. All you need is a random touchdown, and Hollister's actually a sneaky good athlete, and he's been productive when forced into snaps. And then the only other guy I like in tournaments is TJ Hawkinson. The volume's been there with no Galladay. The Bears have allowed the second most PPR points to tight ends this season. And over the last 3 weeks, which were against Tonyan, Rudolph, and Jonnu Smith, 88.6% more fantasy points than league average to the position.
Devin, who's the guy we're overlooking in that price point? Is it someone you want to bring up?
At 2,900, if this player does not outscore some shopping mall store Hollister, or I forget the guy that John even had mentioned.
Jordan Akins.
Yeah.
You'll remember him. He's going to be the most popular tight end on the board this week.
He's not, but okay. So if this player does not outscore him, I will shave the beard and just rock the mustache for the next 2 shows. That's how confident I am. That player is Drew Sample. So Drew Sample for the Bengals saw five targets. He's seeing 80% of the snaps. Brandon Allen is not a good quarterback. He's just looking to dump it down to the tight end. So for me this week, like I said, if Sample's a second-round pick out of Washington, receiving tight end. If he does not outscore those 2 guys, only mustache for 2 weeks.
You must look really bad with just a mustache.
Oh, it's going to look horrible.
I don't know. I think Austin, this is like the old days where you don't throw the rabbit in the bush. Don't throw me in. Don't throw me in. I think he wants to rock that mustache.
No,
with
my
that
wife
kind of call.
will hate me for 2 weeks.
I
should just shave the head and go mustache.
Oh my goodness.
Well, then,
Maybe I'll do that.
Now we're talking.
Yeah,
Maybe.
I couldn't make that bet because I've been growing this baby for about 4 months now. I got facial hair envy here. All right, let's move on to defenses, Phil.
Let's summarize just real quick.
Oh yeah, the summary thing. Yes. So hit me with your cash game plays again, Devin.
Hunter Henry.
John.
Akins, Jordan Akins.
Phil.
Kyle Rudolph, if no Irv Smith.
Gotcha. All right. Defenses. Devin, I'll come back to you on defenses. You've usually got a creative, low-priced defense for us to consider. Who are you looking at this week?
Detroit Lions, 2,500 against Mitchell Trubisky.
Yeah, I thought you might say that one.
I think they're probably going to be the chalk if you're spending down this week. That's it.
Yeah. John, you agree with that? You got any other one you're...
I've got them, and then I'm spending down. The Jets have been kind to me this year. I'd go back to the Jets this week if you couldn't get the extra 400 to get to the Lions, but I think you can probably get there. So the Lions are my call as well.
Phil.
One more I need to mention.
Oh yeah.
Shout out to Matt Waldman, who does some of the best tape on Twitter and in the industry. New England Patriots against Justin Herbert. So Justin Herbert's really struggled against a certain blitz type that I think Bill Belichick will pick up on. Go check out Waldman's Twitter if you want to learn more about it. I won't do it justice. So I think that they'll throw some creative blitzing at the rookie and potentially his footwork is not where it needs to be.
Phil, who do you think?
Pay up to the Packers in tournaments. Just play the defense that's going against Carson Wentz, and good things will happen to your fantasy lineups. In cash games, I kind of like the Colts, but again, that's an if. They've got to be healthy. Last week they weren't, and Derrick Henry trampled them. But if DeForest Buckner, D'Amico Autry, and Bobby Okereke are back, which they might be, then I like targeting that Houston offense without Will Fuller, just to see how much he does actually change things up for them.
Nice. All right, so let's wrap up our show with some stacks. I want to hear some wild ones. John Lee, I'm going to come to you first, just to continue to pay penance for that 1 week where I completely ignored you.
Yeah, let's not forget that. Look, I've got a lot of no-name quarterback stacks, and many of these have been mentioned, so I'm just going to quickly go through them. Mike Glennon and I think you can do a double with Cole and LaVisca, and then run that back with Dalvin Cook. Trubisky to A-Rob, Allen Robinson, and then pick your favorite Detroit running back, whoever ends up playing. The guys have already mentioned Phillip Rivers a couple times. I like that. I think you can do that with Pittman and then come back with Cooks or Akins, now that I know everybody hates him. Sam Darnold with, oh Lord, he's not on my list. DJ Chark, for those of you who are listening here.
DJ Chark.
All right, one last one. We didn't mention this guy at all this week. I'm actually surprised because I think this game could shoot out, and nobody talked about DeAndre Hopkins. I think that looking at some of the early percent rosters across the industry, it's somewhere around 5%. I like him at 5% anytime I can get him at that level. So Kyler Murray, Nuke Hopkins, and run it back with your favorites, Rams receiver. And for me this week, I was looking at some of the early percent roster numbers, and I like Tyler Higbee if he ends up being active. Nobody's looking at him because of how popular Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods are going to be.
Good ones. All right, Phil, tell us about the stacks you like.
I'll take the other side of that one. I like Goff with Woods or Kupp and run it back with Kenyon Drake, Trubisky, Robinson, and hopefully Swift. I don't know that I would do a Lions running back. If Swift doesn't play, I might rather Hawkinson. And even though this one isn't like a highly correlated stack, there's something comforting about stacking your running back with a defense. And there's no better running back this week than Jonathan Taylor, and no better defense than the Colts defense.
We're going to pretend you didn't say that. Devin, tell us your stacks. No better running back. I love it.
Mike Glennon, DJ Chark, and Justin Jefferson. I think Glennon has a big arm and will throw it down the field to Chark. Derek Carr and Nelson Aguilar, if he plays, going up against the Jets. Aguilar has really started to come on in the last couple of weeks. And let's go Colt McCoy and Sterling Shepard.
We got some off the wall ones here.
Down. I mean, I'm riding and dying with two ridiculously cheap quarterbacks that I hope they throw 250 and 2. That's it.
And be sure to check out the articles later in the week, because some of these ride and die cheap options are because we're not seeing a ton of value on Thursday night. If the value opens up, that can really change a lot of the landscape of how we're building our rosters.
I don't know that there's not a lot of value. It's the mid-range is pretty weak on this slate. Like for me, it's there's not a lot of running backs that I have to have in that 6 or 7K. There's no James Robinson this week that you have to play in that 7K range.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, fellas, that's going to do it for our show. Check out all of our content over at footballguys.com. We'll be back next Friday morning with our Week 14 episode. On behalf of John Lee, Devin Knotts, and Phil Alexander, I'm Austin Lee saying thank you for watching, and thank you for being a football guy. Be sure to check out all of our content over at footballguys.com/DFS by clicking the button in front of Devin's face. And if you'd like to subscribe to our YouTube channel, be sure to press the button that's on Phil's face. And if you want to see our latest video, click that giant box that's in front of John Lee's face. Check all that stuff out. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching.